What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to the bench for another episode of Ben Builds with Joe. That's right, we are back on the F8F Bearcat. Today I'm going to go ahead and finally get some paint down on plastic. So let's go ahead and dive right on in. Last time and the time before that, I worked quite a bit on the wheelbase and I'm pretty happy with the way they are right now. I've got my scratch build detail, I've got my wiring in there. I think we are good to go and move on to the next couple of stages. But before we go ahead and leave the wheelbase behind, I want to go ahead and add one little bit of detail, and that is something to cover the transition between the milliput piping and the plastic part. I believe it's some sort of like an air filter or something. There's just kind of a weird transition between the material types. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is I've cut a very thin strip of blue painter's tape, and all I'm going to do is wrap it around so that it covers that transition. And then we're going to tack it down with some super glue. And then I can come back a little bit later and I can maybe do a little detail painting. I think it's like a black rubber seal that goes between the two pipes. I think I'm going to go ahead and just paint it black and then we'll call it a day. So this way it covers that transition and it looks a little cleaner and a little nicer. So something like that actually should be pretty cool. Now on the other side, we're of course going to do the exact same thing. And then I think we're going to go ahead and move into our first time lapse. I want to go ahead and do some seam filling. There's lots of little areas here and there that require a little bit of attention, and some Mr. Surfacer 500 should do the trick. I also want to go ahead and sand up the intake trunking that I made last time out of that milliput. Just make sure it's nice and smooth. And then I want to go ahead and do some sanding on the fuselage and get those tail planes all fitted into place. There is a bit of a step in that rear fuselage, so I want to take that down. And I think at that point, we'll be coming on back and hopefully get into priming. All right, everybody, we are back, and I gotta tell you, I love how these wheelbases have turned out. You can see all the detail, all the piping, all the wires. We got that little transition tape between milliput and plastic. I'm loving how these are coming together. We also do have to come in though and eventually paint them. I'm not sure what color to paint them just yet, but I'm doing some research. I'll figure it out eventually. All the seams are nicely filled in with that Mr. Surfacer 500, and we've gone ahead and kind of sanded down any of the steps or the seam issues that we had before. And so far, I think this is really moving along. We do have to go ahead and focus though on the canopy, making sure we have all of that nicely put into place. We have to do a little bit of sanding on the rear tail planes just to make sure that there's not any sort of discrepancy or rough plastic. We have a little bit too much glue there that got out onto the plastic, but that's okay. That happens from time to time. Nothing some sandpaper won't fix. But now I think we need to go ahead and move on to our second time lapse, and that's going to be focusing on masking the canopy. It's one of those chores I really don't like doing. It's a little bit tedious, but I think we're going to be in good position here. Get this done, we can move on with a regular painting. Now, I will say that this is actually a different canopy than what Joe has on his Dash 2. There's actually a rear support on Joe's canopy. My Dash 1 has just a regular old bubble canopy, and there's no kind of rear support. So that's a little bit of a difference between the Dash 1 and the Dash 2. Let's go ahead and check the fit here, see how that lines up. Oh yeah, that is really nice. Fits in there perfectly. So that's going to be great. It's going to look good either closed or open. Probably going to go ahead and open it just to see all that detail I added in there. We're going to go ahead and jump in there and do some masking, get the gun sight painted up, install a little bit of some clear plastic to act as a reflector for that gun sight, install the canopy, paint up the frames. So let's keep this going, get this thing ready for priming. All right, everybody, we are back, and this is coming along. We've got our canopy installed, we've got our gun sight installed, painted up. We added a little piece of clear plastic for that reflector part, and now I think we're going to go ahead and move over to priming. And for priming, instead of using my typical Stannarez, I'm going to go ahead and use Tamiya Flat Black. I'm going to try to do some black basing and a marbling coat just to see what that does with some very light sky gray. And I'm thinking that might give us a little bit of contrast when we go ahead and lay down that really dark sea blue. Then I want to come in with a very thinned Tamiya Sea Blue and just paint the entire aircraft and see how that turns out. Also, I want to go ahead and paint the drop tank, the wheel bay covers, get that propeller kind of squared away, clean it up, and then we'll see where we go from there. So on with it, guys. Last time lapse of the day. Let's push on, get this thing wrapped up for today. Alright everybody, we are back, and as you can see, our Sea Blue is down on the aircraft, but for some reason I lost the footage for doing any of the marbling coat with that Sky Gray, so I am sorry about that, but you kind of got the general gist of it. Now we're going to go ahead and take some 7000 grit sandpaper and go over the entire surface of the aircraft just to go ahead and bring down any high points, any rough spots in the paint, and to make sure it's nice and smooth. And while I'm on the topic of the surface, guys, I gotta tell you, I've never really worked with Sea Blue before. It's a very difficult paint to work with. It's just so dark, and I'm finding it a bit challenging to go ahead and get that color modulation to show through. Plus, Sea Blue was extremely durable paint, so I don't really know if you'd see too much damage or wear and tear on this particular aircraft, seeing as it's more or less new and had a very short lifespan. If I was so inclined to add a little bit more contrast between different panels and panel lines, I might actually come in with a different Sea Blue. Now, for example, I actually have this right here, and this is Mr. Hobby Aqueous Paint. Is H54. I might be able to come back in and use that as a little bit of a contrasting color, but I'm not really sure I want to do that just yet. But we're going to go ahead and call it quits for today. I want to thank you so much for joining in here. Make sure to go check out Joe's channel. I know this is one of his favorite builds. It's definitely one of my favorite builds. So go ahead, check out his channel, check out his Bearcat. It's looking fantastic. And we'll go ahead and see you back here on the next episode of Ben Builds with Joe. Until then, go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool. And we'll see you back here on episode number 7 for Ben Builds with Joe and the F8F-1 Bearcat by Hobby Boss. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.